This video is about to get very surgical, so stay with me. Now, when we talk about this shift, right, a lot of people's minds points directly to hip hop, directly to rap music, and that is a small example of what the shift is. So don't get me wrong, right? But when I first noticed that there was a war cry, right, that there were people all across the globe that felt this shift and understood this shift, it started with this interview, this Cat Williams interview. I remember exactly where I was when I watched it. I remember the exact way I felt. It felt like Cat Williams had just opened a portal. And if you was peeping game and knew what he was talking about, it was confirmation for you. Now, Kendrick later on goes on to say, Cat Williams had gave you the truth, so I'm going to get mines, which even more confirmed my theory and confirmed the intuition that I had, that there is a collective understanding of what is going on here, and some people understand it and some people don't. And the people that understand it don't even have to have a conversation about it to understand it. Another thing that I noticed he said was that it's our side and it's God's side and then their side, the other side, right? And when you look at all the major releases that have come out since then from, what many would deem the true side of hip hop, right? Which is a conversation we could have. But when you look at GNX and you look at songs like Reincarnated, right? And then you look at the titles like Let God Sort 'Em Out and Malice leaning into his Christianity through the music and taking some of these tracks to, like By the Grace of God to give that time, allowing Pusha T to even show up in that way. You see what I'm saying? And then you get JID's God Does Like Ugly, right? There seems to be a concerted effort, whether intentionally, consciously, or unconsciously, where we are getting brand new perspectives and brand new ideas on what it is to be in relationship with God. Not like and I hate the conversation of, I don't hate the conversation, but I dislike the conversation of spirituality versus religion, because I feel like a lot of people don't really understand what people are talking about when it comes to that. But these songs, these concepts feel a lot more like the spiritual understanding of God, Christ, and all that versus the religious practices, which I think a lot of people put the religious practices first. Now, let me break that down, okay? Let's talk about Reincarnated off of GNX first and foremost. In Reincarnated, bro, let me pull up the lyrics. In Reincarnated, he's talking about past life progression, right? Or past life regression, which is something if you talk to, a standard badge on the chest Christian, they would probably look at this as something that's like demonic or something that's like, weird or boom, boom, or goes against God. And in reality, you recognize that there are levels to this understanding of this reality. And when you go through an experience like past life progression, which is usually given to you by a hypnotist, and you go through visualizations of your past life and all that. I learned this from the homie Emerge. He's a hypnotist, right? And when you notice that, and some of these lines that he's speaking to, right, that might come off as a bump off the shoulder or whatever, like every day a new version of me, a third of me demented. You see what I'm saying? Or lines where he's talking about reincarnated on this earth for 100 plus. These are concepts that aren't usually discussed within Christian rooms or Christian philosophy. But when you understand that that's kind of the position that we've been in on earth, we've incarnated on this or reincarnated on this earth multiple times in order to learn the lessons that we've come to learn. If you know, I forgot her last name, but Louise, the woman that wrote Heal Your Life, you can really start to understand that there's a possibility that maybe even we understood what the mission was when we came here, what we decided to do when we came here, what maybe we knew the lessons, maybe we chose our parents, maybe we chose our circumstances, and the whole point is to forget so that you can be present in the moment, right? Kendrick Lamar is going through this situation where he's witnessing, hypothetically, the lives that he lived prior to Kendrick Lamar. And these have been understood as different musicians, etc. But the part that stood out to me the most is in the third verse, where his carnation or his reincarnation comes directly from heaven. It comes directly from being an angel of music or being somebody who plays the music in heaven, which could be a representation of many of hip hop in general prior to it being perverted, or gospel music or holy music to worship God, right? Within the heavens. And in this verse, he's talking to him about being kicked out because of the pride and because of the ego and because of the wanting more, etc., which is things that you see in humanity today. It's within all of us, right? And that's a brand new perspective on relationships with God. That's a brand new perspective on what it looks like to be in relationship with God. For him to sit here and talk about this, right? For him to sit down and have this conversation with God about coming from earth, being sit down here and remembering what he was sent down here for, remembering what his point was, remembering why he came here. It breaks down the whole idea of what reincarnation actually is through the lens of past life regression. That's a different perspective. You see what I'm saying? When we get to let God sort them out and we talk about the grace of God, right? And, I know killers who, some behind the wall, and he's talking about God's grace. And that's the ultimate idea of what I think is missing in a lot of the teachings that are coming from Christianity, or the teachings that have pushed people away from Christianity. And that's the fact that people aren't fully trusting in the grace of God. They don't really fully believe in the story of Jesus. And you can tell by the way they police themselves or the way they police others, in the way that they interact with God or consume what is to be given by God. And when you hear songs like The Grace of God, where he's talking about God's grace for killers, murderers, drug dealers, all of that, these are the people that Jesus came down earth to hang with. You see what I'm saying? They came down to earth to be around. And a lot of people forget that part of the story and look and point at the people who are on the streets, or people who don't have, or people who are, in their struggle currently, including me. We do this. You see what I'm saying? And as humans, we are judgmental as humans, but it's all about recognizing it and catching it in real time, and sometimes being okay with the judgment. But it's also to understand that if God has grace and Jesus could be around the prostitutes and be around the murderers and the thieves and all this different stuff, imagine the type of grace he might have for you. Imagine the type of grace he might have. If your compassion is so much of somewhat, if you give your love and forgiveness to so many people, God's grace is 10 million times that. And when you hear songs like The Grace of God, it reinstills that conversation, and it makes people more open to believing in God, which is the point. That's the reason Jesus came. That's the reason why he was carnated into that body and came and represented what it was to be pure. If I could do it, y'all could do it. Just get as close to this as possible. You see what I'm saying? And sometimes you recognize that in the art, and a lot of the times people are not going to want to go to a church. People are not going to want to sit in front of a pastor because there's a lot of things that might be heavy on them that they don't want to come out, or feelings that they don't want to come out. It's uncomfortable, right? But when you hear it in the music, let's get to JID. God does like ugly, right? And you got songs like Of Blue that are just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. The beginning of the song is a woman singing about miracles, which is something I realized a lot of people's lack of belief in God is also centered around the lack of belief in miracles, right? And because miracles has been sold as this thing that's so far outside of you, right, that's not within you, that people start to become just nihilist almost. You see what I'm saying? Where it's only about what you can physically see and what you can really feel. You feel me? Instead of having the faith in the things that you are not able to see, which is where you get your intuition, your faith, all that stuff. But for JID to lead with God does like ugly, it changes the whole perspective of God doesn't like ugly. This idea that God doesn't like something about you or doesn't love something about you, as if you haven't come across somebody in your life that has red flags or has something about them that you have a distaste for, but you still love them. And if you believe you can do that, imagine what God can do. But when you twitch and shift the messaging like this, from God doesn't like ugly to God does like ugly, it gives people the perspective of this grace and this forgiveness that's talked about. God actually does give that to the people who believe. You see what I'm saying? I would like to believe he gives it to the people in general. You feel me? But where you know what I'm saying, where you go mentally, spiritually, and all that is based on where you are in your journey. But God does like ugly is a message that the kids should be receiving. Because when you say God doesn't like ugly and God doesn't like this and God doesn't like that, you push away the children. You push away the people that make mistakes. You push away the people that blame themselves. You push away the people that have a hard time forgiving themselves for certain things. You see what I'm saying? God does like ugly reinforces the message that everybody is welcome. And when I think of the shift, that might be what this is all about. The ultimate message of releasing shame, releasing guilt in the many ways that are out there to release it. You see what I'm saying? The understanding of what this is. Even when we talk about the Age of Aquarius, right? Which I believe that we are in. We're not fully in it, but we are transitioning. And because of that, we are essentially entering the Age of Aquarius, which is why everywhere you look, things are being pulled apart. Things are being, you know what I mean? I have videos on this from a year ago, but during the battle with Kendrick Lamar and Drake, because I'm not just looking at this battle as, oh, two guys battling. And like people think that's not what this is about. If you've been on YouTube, you've been on my channel, you understand that. Kendrick Lamar and Drake is a precipice of the shift worldwide. We're using something that we all understand, right, to break down the shift that is going on. The reason why things are coming to a head all over the world in politics, in music, in media, even in small community wars. You see what I'm saying? In tribal warfare. You see tribal warfare everywhere. It's because we're transitioning into a new era, and those who are allowing themselves to be stuck in the old, which is feelings of bitterness, anger, all these different things. When you're holding on to that, you are lowering your frequency and you are staying in that dimension, right? Where you are being presented with opportunities to overcome those feelings, you raise your frequency and move into the next dimension, right? That's my position. Let's read this though. When is the Age of Aquarius? A great age is mentioned above is associated with the position of the March equinox. In 2024, the location of the sun on the March equinox is in the constellation of Pisces, but also on the border of Aquarius. So we are slowly moving into a new age from Pisces to Aquarius, which is interesting we'll do a whole video on this, which is interesting when you look at Cat Williams and you notice that Cat Williams is an Aquarius moon. You see what I'm saying? Which represents the emotions, who you are when your mask is off, right? For Cat Williams to essentially kick open this portal, right? We'll talk about that a different time. We'll do that in a whole separate video. I don't want to blend videos. You see what I'm saying? But even when we move down into, what's it called? Most astrologers believe that the age of Pisces began roughly around the year 200. This means that the age of Aquarius begins in the next few hundred years, though there are some differences of opinion, especially when you talk about the different calendars of astrology. We don't know for sure, which is why we can't rely so much on our understanding physically and what we see with our eyes, and got to go with our gut and our intuition, right? We're transitioning from the age of Pisces into Aquarius. What does the Age of Aquarius mean? First, let's take a look back at the Age of Pisces to see the major challenges that have been a part of our reality for the past 2,000 years. We have been largely considering the values of faith, belief, religion, and intuition versus science, proof, logic, and hierarchy. We can look back to the end of Age of Aquarius when the Roman Empire was in power. The people of India made the cow sacred during the Age of Taurus. This is just how our reality shifts and changes. So we're not talking about, oh, people made this type of song and like people on that side are trying to make it deem, right? We're not just talking about that. It's not just about that guy's making this type of song and that guy's making this type of song. This music somewhere, right, whether identifiable or not, is changing the belief system and patterns of the way people perceive religion, spirituality, Christianity, all this different stuff. You see what I'm saying? And when you look, you see that everywhere, not just music, but hip hop is a prime example, because hip hop and music is, you know, as the Bible says, is references to music as a vital component of worship. So that's what we're using to break this down. You see what I'm saying? And I'm not gonna get too deep into the Age of Aquarius, because I want to save that for the Cat Williams video. But this is what we mean. God is back at the forefront of hip hop. God never left Kendrick's music. God never left JID's music. So let's not say that and say, well, God has always been in the music. I understand. What we're talking about is the open expression and the open perspective of shifting the idea of what it means to follow God. You see what I'm saying? To give you the full idea of the grace, the full idea of the complexity of what it is to follow God, and how that is different for every single person who worships. You see what I'm saying? And that's all I really wanted to get it across. This is the shift that I'm talking about. And it's so much deeper and so much more layered than just the music. But we use the music as a face to break that down. You see what I'm saying? If you didn't understand that, which I'm pretty sure you do because you've been here this whole time, then you understand what we're doing here and what we will consider to make stronger efforts to do in general. But that's all I really want to talk about. Like, comment, subscribe. I also see myself as one of those artists that put God in my music, especially recently. If you want to check out my Chains and Whips freestyle and my perspective on things, I think it's also authentic. And I think it's also what leads you to look at things in a different perspective. You can see a sample of that in my Chains and Whips freestyle. And I think you will love it. And that's because the people love it. So that's my perspective. You feel me? But I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to catch y'all, man.